Hello and welcome to After Hours 44. The show you may never see. You're wondering why, aren't you? Yes, so am I. There's a show, obviously, here it is. But it is proving problematic to create. The idea was it was all going to be fine. It was going to be YouTube premiere. That means if you're watching live, you can chat as usual, and hopefully we'll have connectivity in time to join you. Talking of which, the reason it is a YouTube premiere was because we made the fateful decision, shall I say, nay, catastrophic decision, Mike?
I'd go with that.
Yes, I would. This is the internet speed. Now, I know what you're thinking. The down isn't good, is it? Yes, but look at the upload. We've been away. We should be about an hour from returning as you watch this if you're watching live. And as you can see, we have been challenged. So as I said at the beginning, you may or may not see this. It depends if we can actually get it uploaded. There is a show, honestly, but whether we can get it uploaded or not is another matter. Note to self, never leave the confines of MacBites headquarters. Ever again. It's a bit of a difference for us at MacBites headquarters, where we're used to speeds of 385 down and 22 up. These speeds are 142 times slower on the download and, wait for it, 550 times slower on the upload. It's been agonising.
You know when you have a go at me working in the middle of a field?
Yes.
Well, I was in the middle of a field this morning and I got 15 up and 15 down.
So, what I will be attempting to do with this show, should you be watching it right now, is to upload it sat in the middle of a rather damp field in Yorkshire, as it's the only way to go. But enough of our lovely holiday. Agonising week. Yes, what have we got for you? Well, we've had to adjust slightly based on the conditions, but we have an update on macOS Catalina. We did briefly mention keyboard cleaner, and Mike helpfully found a 64-bit version of it. So a quick look at that, and something else that I found as well, whilst I was looking for the first one, which I don't think you'd find, but I'll talk about that later. Then we've got some freebies. There's some rather nice, snazzy freebies. Then Mike's talking about pivot tables. Somebody had the sense to get organised, didn't they?
That would be me.
It was. Well, I'm organised, but 45 is going to be the best show ever. It's going to be about 90 minutes of me ranting about travelling with your tech. The definitive guide of what not to do, which is everything I've done in 44. But more on that in 45. Once we've done pivot tables, we're going to have a look at Scrivener 3. So, as I said, a little bit different from our original plans. Did I mention technical challenges? Only slightly. But anyway, onward with Catalina. Have you done the Catalina thing, Mike?
No, I was going to do the other thing, the Mojave thing. And then you told me it wasn't available in the store anymore. So.
If you were on High Sierra like Mike and you were tempted to do the Mojave thing, just before Catalina came out, yeah, they knackered you.
Yeah, but they sprung it on us.
Exactly.
They could have had another week.
Exactly. That's the problem. Now, last time, when I was looking to do the High Sierra thing before Mojave came out, they had a date for it, so I downloaded the installer well before that date. If you were to now go to the store and try to update, it would be Catalina you were offered, dear.
I know.
But never fear. I have a pen drive with Mojave on it, and I'm now taking bids from Mike for it. But Catalina's here. They did spring it on us. We talked about it in episode 41, and they said it was an October release, but we never actually got a date. It unceremoniously landed on Monday the 7th. Now, it's always a worrying time in terms of whether or not your software is going to continue to work as expected. But if you were watching that earlier show, you'll recall I mentioned the preparations that you could take to get ready for the update. And they were more important than ever because things break between point updates. They do. But this time, all your 32-bit apps are no longer. So I can't upgrade, because if you remember, I had that iTV app. Still no 64-bit version, so not upgrading anytime soon. But nothing that's 32-bit is going to work. So what I said was you can check roaringapps.com, and that will give you status updates on what is and isn't compatible. And there was another app from St Clair Software called Go64. And I ran that in the demo, which was a YTP, I seem to recall. YouTube Premiere. Yeah, so I ran it on my system and found that I had very few apps that were 32-bit solely, but I did have dependencies that were 32. So I decided not to upgrade just yet. But I must admit, I was tempted on my laptop, but I stopped myself in time. That would have just put the tin hat on the technical troubles of the week, wouldn't it? If I'd have come away with Catalina and nothing working. Thankfully, I didn't. Anyway, I am mentioning it because even though Adobe are saying that Creative Cloud is 64-bit, there are still problems. Problems are being reported widely that apps are not working. I think Adobe are going to see this as a lovely way to get people, what should we say, onboarded to the cloud, paying a subscription.
Think you're right.
Well, there are problems with Creative Cloud, so if you are reliant on it, don't move. I would have problems if I'd done the stupid thing and updated with Snagit. Snagit, the current version, is capturing blank screens. In fact, it's even worse than that. There are reports of serious problems with compatibility in the latest MacBook Pros. You could not make this stuff up. Because Apple have a monopoly on the kit. How can it not work with their operating system?
There's lots of things that don't work, as has been proved this morning.
Well, yes. 45 is going to be a fantastic show. The definitive guide of what not to do. Now, talking about Snagit. Snagit have also announced that they are bringing out the very latest version. So that'll be Snagit 2020. And that is due for either announcement or release 22nd of October. So I'm going to be all over that because I use it.
Perfect vision.
Is it?
2020.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. So upshot of the story with Catalina is, be careful out there. Apple have turned the OS update landscape into a tech version of the Wild West, leaving developers and users everywhere scrambling to catch up. I just took the opportunity of when it said, would you like to update? I was looking for the you must be kidding button. I opted for no, not now, in the end. But do be careful out there. Now, the app that was mentioned briefly when I said there wasn't a 64-bit version and Mike proved me wrong was the keyboard cleaner. So let's have a look at that. So you may remember a few shows back, I talked about an app that I had. I was demonstrating Go64. And the app that I mentioned was called Keyboard Cleaner. And I mentioned it because it hadn't been updated since time immemorial, to be honest. And I mentioned it, I said it was 32-bit, Go64 flagged it up as being 32-bit and that it wouldn't work under Catalina. Mike dived in and managed to find that there had been an update. Now, the update has been out quite a while. I wondered why I hadn't discovered this update, but I still have no idea. But there has been an update to it, so I downloaded it, gave it a go. Spoiler, works well. But while I was researching it, I also found another application. So I'm going to show you both. So first of all, this is the site for Keyboard Cleaner. As you can see, the update was, now it could be February, or it could be, let's have a look. Ooh. It's American dates. I can only tell by that one in 2006. So it was August in 2018, so quite a while back. I have no idea why I didn't find it. That's worrying me, that, but I'm not going to dwell on it. So I downloaded it. All you need to do is to click this link here, and it will download it. I have not yet installed it. There are reasons for this. So I will go and get it by unzipping this. It seems to have unzipped quite a few times, but never mind that. Now, I need to actually put it in my applications folder, which is not going to be simple to start with. This is because I don't have my applications folder in the side. But, I do. There it is. I'm lying to myself. Never mind. So here's my download. So I'm going to drag that over to there and drop it in there. Now, I usually use Alfred. So if I do the keyboard cleaner thing, which is down the bottom, I'm going to get a message. And it's saying it can't be opened because it's from an unidentified developer, which is one of the problems, and I don't like this with Apple. They could be a little bit more forgiving with this. So basically, I cannot run it at all with... Now, this is only the first time, but I cannot run it with a launcher of any description. So I actually need to have this window open, and I need to right-click on it and say Open. I'll still get an error message, sort of an error message, but I do get the option to open it. Now, the default is cancel, but you can choose to open it. Now, I hope that you're seeing a completely blank screen. This is why it's not a good idea to do this live. Right, basically the keyboard is now locked and you can clean your keyboard. You then need to use Command and Q to close the app, which I'll do. There we go. That is literally all it does. Now, having done that once, now you can use your launcher and there's no problem at all. So once you've done it once, it's okay. Now, you may notice from what you're looking at there, and your mileage may vary, I'm using my MacBook Air, and I've got the resolution set to a very strange resolution in order that I can record it and it match up with everything else that I've recorded for this rather odd show. And I don't see anything on there other than a mouse pointer, which does actually move around. Normally, you see a little message that says Command and Q. Close this out with Command and Q. You did see it fly past, but then it disappeared. So it is Command and Q to close it. That is all the app does. Now, some people have said, well, that's useless. Keyboards are Bluetooth now, just turn them off. Or even just unplug them, which is fine, but not on a laptop. So I actually installed this on my laptop as I was packing to come away because my laptops were filthy and I decided I would clean them before I left. So I needed to install it. But as I say, I also found another one called Keyboard Lock. Now, that one I have already installed, configured and tried. So I should be okay with that one. So I'm just going to show you the website. The apps are both free. They both do exactly the same thing. Obviously, looking at this second one, I would say the website's a lot better, but they do exactly the same things. So I hit the download, I installed it, and it is there. If I go to my launcher, and it's called Keyboard Lock. So one is actually implying that you can clean your keyboard with it active. The other one's saying just lock your keyboard. That's why it mentioned cats, I think, meandering around. Cats get a bad rep. So that one is much prettier, irrespective of whatever I've done to this poor laptop to get a screen out of it. It's saying Command and Q to unlock it. So I'm pressing lots and lots of keys, listen, and nothing's happening. But as long as I do Command and Q, it will then come out of that app. So both of them are incredibly simple apps, but both of them are incredibly useful for the occasions when you need to clean a keyboard. Now, maybe you turn your laptops off. I tend not to turn them off that often, to be honest. So both of those are incredibly useful. I'm tending towards the second one at the moment. It's actually prettier. But I wouldn't have gone looking for an app to do that. It's one of those things I found many, many years ago. And I wouldn't install it automatically. It's not like Alfred. I know instantly that Alfred's not installed. But when you do need to clean a keyboard quickly or something like that, handy to have. So I'll put them in our handy to have toolkit. So that was, for reference once more, Keyboard Cleaner and Keyboard Lock. Now, onwards to the freebies. We always like to have some freebies. This time, new freebies, completely new freebies. I found a site called Design Cuts, and they are in the middle right now of an online conference, as it says. Free to attend, lots of freelance designers talking and chatting about things. What is of more significance to us is that they have a range of freebies on offer during the conference. So do go and have a look at those. There's all kinds of stuff. And they've actually got, once you download these freebies, which you'll find at the link, once you download those, as soon as you've made a purchase, and you do make a purchase, but it's for zero money, they offer you another bundle. And there's lots and lots more freebies to get straight away with that. So do check that out. They should also have recordings of the sessions that they've been providing, and they've been very good. So if you're interested in design, that's a really good place to start out. Have a look at the videos and download all the freebies. One day, these freebies are going to be used in a demo. Have you noticed I've not been doing too many project-based demos, but I'm liking the space backgrounds. So I might be tempted.
They're nice.
They are, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I like that old standard one as well.
I like the animal one.
Oh, well, I love animal ones. I only wish we had. I'm going to mention. I only wish we had the ability to do video picture in picture, because our new baby Lola is. We're in the hotel room right now, as you can probably hear, because the cleaners are outside whistling and coughing. She's asleep on the floor, bless her. She looks very peaceful, not in the slightest bit worried about technical woes. No. Just like the muddy field outside.
Yes.
And the bunny rabbit she found last night.
Yes.
It's all right, don't panic, she didn't catch it. Mike was at the other end of the lead, she wasn't moving that fast. So freebies. So check out those freebies. There's also freebies as usual from Creative Market this week. creativemarket.com/free-something.
Goods.
That's
Goods?
the one.
Is it free goods?
Free-goods.
Oh, well
excellent,
remembered.
Mike. Well remembered, Mike. I haven't got that on the slide,
That's
so
because
excellent.
I've seen it 43 times.
I'm impressed that you remember it because I've typed it 43 times and I didn't remember. Anyway, I'm going to hand over from Freebies over to Mike, who's going to talk about pivot tables.
Okay, pivot tables. Pivot tables are a great way of summarising data. Data that's stored like this in a tabular format. Now, before I actually start creating the pivot table, the first thing that I'm going to do is to convert this data into an Excel table. Now, you look at this data and you think, but it is in a table. The data's in column and row structure with headings across the top. It might be a table to you and I, but to Excel, it's just a list. How do I know that this isn't an Excel table? Because looking at the ribbon across the top, we don't have a table tab. The reason that I'm going to convert the data into a table is so that as I add more data down at the bottom of the list, that data will automatically be recognised by the pivot table. So it means that I don't have to keep amending the pivot table's data source range as new data gets added. To convert this into a table, I just click somewhere in the data, anywhere at all, and click on Insert Table. It's picked up the correct range, A1 to F166, and it's also detected that the table has headers. It will treat the first row as headings. I can change either of those if I need to, but I'm happy with them, so I'll click on OK. Now, when I click into this data, anywhere between A and F1 and 166, I get the Table tab appearing on the ribbon. When you click on the Table tab, the table has a name, and this table is called Table 1. Now I can leave the table as Table 1, or I can rename it, and I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it MacBites. More logical and meaningful name. Now I'm ready to create a pivot table. First of all, I need to decide what information I want to show. And what information I want to show here is the number of views or downloads per series name. So I've got two series names. I've got After Hours and I've got MacBites, which is the podcast. So I want a list of the series names, After Hours and MacBites, and the number of views or downloads for each one. To do it, click anywhere at all in the data, just anywhere, and click on Insert Pivot Table. It has automatically detected the fact that my cursor is in the table called MacBites, so it's suggesting that I use that table as my data source, which is what I want to do. You can change that if necessary, but usually Excel will pick that up. Then it asks me where I want to place the pivot table, and I can either insert a new worksheet or I can put the pivot table into one of the existing worksheets in this file. And I want to choose Existing Worksheet, and with that selected, click into the Table or Range field, and in this example I'm going to click on Pivots, click on A1, and then click on OK. So I'm telling Excel that's where I want the pivot table to start. I get a pivot table placeholder in columns A to C, 1 to 18, although the pivot table itself will take up as much room as it needs. So it won't always be 3 columns and 18 rows. And on the right hand side, I have a pivot table fields panel. So if I want to build a pivot table that shows after hours and MacBites there in column A and the number of views in column B, I need to drag the series name box, series name heading into the rows section and drag the views downloads into the values section. And there is my pivot table. So it's picked up the data from the series name field and added that as row headings, and it's generated the total, because that's the default, the total of the views or downloads, and put that into the second column. I'm going to change the headings. I don't need it to say row labels and sum of views and downloads. So let's change row labels to show name or series name. And instead of sum of views and downloads, I'm going to change it to say total views and downloads. Or I could have just put total views. To make this look a little bit neater, I'm going to make the data bigger. I'm going to make the font bigger. There we go. Let's make it a little bit bigger so we can all see it. And I don't really need the total views and downloads column to be as wide as it is. So I could just I could wrap the text there, make that wrap over onto 2 lines, make the column a little bit narrower. There we go. And the row a bit taller. But to get the numbers easier to read with commas in them, rather than selecting all the numbers and then go and apply comma format, which I can do, I'm going to right click on one of the numbers, and from the menu I will choose value field settings, then click on number, and then go and choose the number format that I want to use. That, as you can see, has applied it to all of the numbers in this pivot table. Next pivot table I'm going to do is to show the number of episodes per month. Number of episodes per month. And I'm going to break that down into after hours and MacBites and do it on a monthly basis. So go back to my data, insert pivot table, choose where I want the pivot table to go, and again I'll put this on the pivot sheet, but I'll stick this starting in D1. Click on OK. I'll drag series name into columns, and I will drag release date, because that is the name of one of the columns. I will drag release date and drop that into rows. What it does by default is it groups the data. So when it sees dates, it groups the data, and it's grouped it by year because we have multiple years. It would group by the highest value it finds. So within each year we have quarters, and within quarters we have months. So in this case, because we have multiple years, it will group by year. If we only had 1 year, it would group by quarters. And then you can drill down. There's also a grand total that is automatically generated, just like it was in the first pivot table. And I wanted, what else I wanted? I wanted to know the number of episodes for each year broken down, for each series broken down by year. So if I dragged in views and downloads, I drag that to values. What that has done is that has actually given me a total number of views and downloads broken down by MacBites and after hours by year. But I can also drill down by quarter and by month, which, although is great, I don't particularly want that on this example. But the first thing is, I don't actually want a total. It defaults to a sum, and I want to change that to a count. I want to know how many episodes there were, not the number of views and downloads. To do that, right-click on any of the cells with a number in, select Summarize Values By, and change it to count. And that's now given me a count. So yes, there is 165 altogether. 123 of those are MacBites episodes. 42 of those are After Hours episodes. To remove the plus signs, if I want to stop people drilling down, then I will just drag from the rows section, drag quarters away. So literally drag it out of rows back to the list at the top, and do the same thing with release date. And I'm left with just the year. I'll also change these headings a little bit. So instead of row labels, I'll put year. Instead of column labels, I'll put series name. And instead of count of views and downloads, I'll put number of episodes. If I want to apply some formatting to that, I can do that. I can change, for example, change the color of these cells here. So let's just go and change the background color to a blue, just so that it's differentiated it. And if I want to make the font bigger, I can do that like I did in the previous one. Now, let's say that we have more shows added. So let's go back down to the bottom of the list. And to save a little bit of time, I'll just copy and paste. But if I was doing this for real, I would put the real data. First thing you'll notice is the little blue marker that appears at the bottom corner of F170. That was in F166. But as I add more data, that little blue marker moves, and that little blue marker indicates the end of the table. So the table now goes from A1 to F170, not A1 to F166. Has that updated the two pivot tables? No, it hasn't, because pivot tables do not automatically update when the data changes. So if I want to change those pivot tables, get them updated, I need to click into one of them and go to Analyze and then click the Refresh button. Now that will only update that pivot table. So I need to go back to the other pivot table and do the same thing. Actually, I've not clicked the button, I've just hovered over it, which is why there's been no change to the data. And that's because I want to show you something else in a second. So that's what you do. You go to Analyze and you click the Refresh button, but you have to do that for each pivot table. So rather than actually doing that, I'm going to click on the arrow next to the refresh and select Refresh All, and that will update all the pivot tables, not just in this worksheet, but if there were pivot tables in this file, they would get updated as well. Other pivot tables on other sheets in this file. So everything is now updated. Now let's say I had altered the column widths deliberately. I want to make these columns a little bit wider. Maybe I'm trying to fill the screen. Maybe it's like a visual report or a dashboard. If I do a refresh, watch what happens. The columns jump back. What it's done is it's set the column widths to their auto fit values. Now you may have used auto fit before in normal Excel. When I say normal Excel, I mean not in a pivot table. If I alter a column width and then I double click on the line between the two letters, it sets the width of the column to match the widest entry in that column. And that's what happens when you refresh your pivot tables. Now that's fine, and that's a default setting. But very often, as I've just done, you actually deliberately set your columns to be a certain width. Maybe you are trying to fill the screen in a visual report. Maybe you've got something down here like a chart and you want that chart to be a certain size. So what I need to do is I need to stop it changing the column widths when the pivot tables are refreshed. To do that, click in the first pivot table, click on Analyze, then click the Options button on the left, go to the Layout tab and take the tick out of Auto Fit Column Widths on Update, and then click OK. And then do the same with the other pivot table. Analyze, Options, Layout, take the tick out of Auto Fit Column Widths on Update. So now the columns will not have their widths changed when the pivot table is updated. So if I go and do another refresh, I know I've not changed any data, but I can still do a refresh. It has no effect on the column widths. Now let's say I want to produce a chart. I want to show a chart or create a chart that shows the split of total views and downloads by after hours and MacBites. To do that, just click into the pivot table. You don't actually need to select the data that you're going to build the chart from. Just click into the pivot table and create your chart. So insert, and then you choose the type of chart that you want to create, be it a bar chart, a pie chart, or whatever. So let's go for a standard column chart. And there it is. There is my pivot chart. Call it a pivot chart because it's a standard chart that just happens to be based on a pivot table. So just to go over that again, you don't need to select all of the data. It will automatically use all the data that's in the pivot table. And then you just create your chart and it builds it for you. You can, as with any chart, make changes to the chart. So you can change the colors, you can change the titles, you can remove this legend or key if you don't need it, and so on and so on. Next thing I want to go through is a feature called slicers. Now, before I do that, I will just build another pivot table. So I'm going to go back to my data and go to Insert Pivot Table, exactly as I did before. Choose where to put the pivot table. I'll put it on this slicer sheet here. And for this one, I'm going to drag in, let's drag in years. Drag years into rows, and I will drag duration into values. Also make this a little bit bigger. Zoom in so you can see it, so that's better. Right, what this is actually doing is this is counting. This isn't adding up the total duration for each year, it's counting. And that's because I dragged the duration field in. And if we go back and look at the data, the duration field is not numeric. The only numeric column I've got in this table is views and downloads. Everything else is either a date, a time, or text, and it's only when you drag numeric data in to the values section that it defaults to a sum. Everything else defaults to a count. So that is counting how many episodes there were in each year. So I want to change this. I want to change this to a sum. So I right click on one of the cells in column B, go to summarize values by, and change it to sum. Now, even that's not right because I need to change the format to show a time, because that's what I'm trying to show, the total number of hours and minutes of MacBites, whether it be after hours or the MacBites podcast per year. So if I right click on one of these numbers and then go to number format and go to time, and let's just choose hours, minutes, seconds. What that's telling me is there's been, for example, 2 hours, 13 minutes and 51 seconds of MacBites in 2019. Well, that's definitely not true, because if you think about the after hours, many of them have been over 3 hours, and we have done a few MacBites podcast episodes this year. The reason for this is because when Excel has times that are over 24 hours, it takes the 24 hours, or if it's more than 24 hours and there's a multiple of 24 hours, it takes that and subtracts from it the total, and it leaves you with the remainder. What I mean by that, just to give you a simple example, let's imagine the total for 2019 came to 50 hours. What you'd actually see in the cell as the answer, well, not the answer because it's not a formula, but what you'd see in the cell in here would be 2. And the reason you'd see 2 is because it takes the 50, it divides it by 24, because there's 24 hours in a day, and what you get is the remainder. I know it's a bit odd, but that's the way Excel does it. So it takes the total, divides by 24, and then gives you the remainder. So the remainder, when you've got 50 divided by 24, is 2. So 24, 48, subtract 48 from 50, and you've got 2. That's the workings behind it. So the way to solve it is, again, to change the format of these cells. And this works in normal Excel as well, not just pivot tables. But I'm going to set a custom format, which is putting the hour bit in square brackets. That's the important bit, colon, a minute. I'm not going to bother with the seconds. Okay, so there we go. That is showing now the correct values. So that's telling me that in 2019, we've done 98 hours and 13 minutes. And if I just undo that, that's where the 2 hours 13 minutes came from. Because if you think about it, let's just redo that. 98.13. Well, if you take 98 hours, 13 minutes, you divide that by 24 hours, that will give you 24, 48, 72, 96. Then out of the 98.13, take away 96, because that's a multiple of 24, and you're left with 213. And that's what that was there. So yes, times are a weird thing in Excel, whether it be just Excel or pivot tables. But hopefully that makes sense to you. So I've now got my pivot table. I was, and I still am, going to talk about slicers, but I've kind of deviated because of the example I've chosen. But never mind, we'll come on to slicers now. I want to do a filter. And what I want to do is I want to set this up so that I can filter just by series, so after hours or MacBites. And to do that, I will drag series name into filters. That adds a filter to the pivot table, and that means that I can click the drop down arrow and I can choose just after hours. So I'm now looking at how much time we've spent delivering after hours in 2018 and 2019. Or I can say, show me just MacBites. So in 2007, we delivered 7 hours and 12 minutes worth of MacBites podcast. In 2019, we delivered 9 hours and 19 minutes of MacBites podcast. The thing with the filters, and let's just put that back to select all. The thing with the filters is that they are limited in what they can show you. And for example, if I wanted to move that filter somewhere else, it won't let me do it. So this is where slicers come in. This slicers is filters on steroids. And what I'll do is I'll drag the series name away from the filters section and I'll add a slicer in instead. So to add a slicer in, I will go to the pivot table, anywhere at all in the pivot table, and click on Analyze Insert Slicer. Choose series name and click OK. And that is my slicer. You can move the slicer anywhere you like. You can resize it. You can even change its colour. Pick the same colour there, pick a different colour. There we go. And the way the slicer works is you've got buttons, and you have as many buttons as there are items in the column you've chosen to slice on. So if I click on After Hours, it now applies the filter. If I click on MacBites, it applies the filter. If I click on the button with the clear filter, the little red cross, that clears the filter. I could select that. I could change its width like this. And I can have, instead of one column of buttons, I can go up to Slicer and have 2 columns of buttons like that. And then place this anywhere I like. So slicers allow you to apply a filter at the click of a button. Much more intuitive, much friendlier than doing it with the original method, which was to add the item to the filter section. Okay, so that is pivot tables. I'm going to stop there. I hope you found that useful.
And now, Introduction to Content Creation with Scrivener 3. Long threatened, I might add. Long threatened. Now, we're starting our preparations for NaNoWriMo. NaNoWriMo, if you are unaware, is National Novel Writing Month. And our preparations are this introduction to creating content with Scrivener 3. Notice that title, Creating Content. As long as it's got some element of text-based content, we've got you covered. So not just the next instalment of 50 Shades or any other novel of your choice, but also blog posts, emails, lead magnets, journals, course materials, training manuals. The content will be relevant for all Scrivener users, or even wannabe Scrivener users who've never used it before. This is very much an overview of Scrivener's capabilities. So a lot less hands-on, but there will be hands-on that follows, both at the end of the intro and in future shows. So there's going to be more. But first of all, what is Scrivener? Now, it's pitched as an application for writers, but it's much more than a traditional single application. It would be more accurate to call it a writer's studio, a Swiss Army knife for writers, or anybody working with text. Now, life before Scrivener. Well, Scrivener can be best explained in terms of looking at life before Scrivener. So what did we all used to do? Some of us may still be doing it. But it was basically monolithic writing. You started at the beginning and you wrote on until the end of a piece. This, of course, assumes you never need to change anything like a character's name halfway through, and that you never need to reorganise anything. And if that's the case, then Microsoft Word was your friend, and it ruled the writing world for years and years. It's become so ingrained that even if you do use Scrivener, probably at times you're going to need to import from Word or export to Word. And the Scrivener developers are well aware of that, and it can handle both situations elegantly. But in terms of the creation of word-based content, written-based content, don't know about you, but when I'm writing or creating content, my mind, there's just a maelstrom of ideas, and they refuse to arrive in an orderly manner and queue patiently, waiting for me to get around to capturing them in a neat and linear way. When I'm making a presentation, I've got slides all over the place. They do tend to be in the right order, but there'll be blank ones in between with just a comment on, so I can remind myself of what I intended to put on them. But it would be very uncommon for me to start at the beginning and create the slides 1 to 100. Now, Mike tends to do that. He must have a very linear mind. I don't. So as if an idea comes to me, I'll throw it down on a slide and I'll sort the mess out later. Now, if you think of trying to do that in terms of written-based content in a single Word file, it would be a nightmare. But that's what we all tend to do. The problem I find with that is managing the content. And the longer it gets, the worse it gets. So long-form text content, what do you do with it? Do you keep it in a single file, or do you create separate files, maybe for separate chapters? Now, Word will tell you it can handle that, but from a practical perspective, all of the management is up to you. What Word can do is, yes, you can create a file and put chapter 1 in it, and another one and put chapter 2 in it. But then, as I'm saying, to search across files, no, it's not going to like that. And when you move file 1, does file 2 go with it? No, that you've got to manage that as well. So really, digital hadn't caught up with analog. In terms of the multiple files, should you do it that way? Well, Word's got a feature, which is master files. And the idea is that you have one file, and from within it, you reference lots of individual extra files, which I've never had work properly. It always seems to lose its connection with one or other of the files. So I must admit, I don't like it that way. No. Single file doesn't work well. The multiple files, not much better, to be honest with you. Now, if you were to ask a group of content creators, what's the most important application feature? What would help them most in their endeavours? You'd probably get 1,000 different suggestions. And there's a very good reason for that. And that's because no piece of content or writing exists in isolation. If you write a paragraph, a scene, a chapter, there's doubtless going to be information about that content that you need to retain, but it's not actually part of the content itself. So what I mean by that is you've written, let's say, a chapter, and you've had a go at it 3 times, so you've got multiple drafts of it. Then you've edited it a couple of times, so you've got multiple revisions of it. And then the stuff that you've mentioned in the chapter, you've got references for. And there's footnotes that you need included and endnotes, and you'd like to create a synopsis of it. And, if you think about the old way of doing that, you'd probably have the synopsis in yet another document. You may, if the longer the content gets, want to have an outline of that content. You may want to highlight the structure of it, or work to targets. All of those are listed on the right. But also in relation to that content, you've got notes about it, research about it, links that you've referenced, metadata about the content itself. What's, for example, is the status of it? Is it complete? Is it waiting for its first draft? Is it waiting for an edit? There may be keywords you'd like to attach to it. So what I do in one of the files I've got, I have a MacBites file. And if there's any content from Siri in it, it will have a keyword attached to it of Siri or Lady Siri. You may want to have labels, status, word counts, or even comments. You may be working with somebody else who's providing comments and feedback, or maybe just yourself. But all of that information is nothing whatsoever to do with the content, in terms of you wouldn't want somebody to actually see that content. It's meta. It's metadata attached to the content that you do want your reader to finally see. And there's a lot of it. And how do you manage that? Well, that is where Scrivener comes in. As I've said, it is not just for novels, although if you were to look it up online, I would understand if you came away with that feeling that it was just for novels. It's not. Personally, I've created training manuals with it, long training manuals, as well as shorter ones. I've done magazine articles that have been published. So that was a shorter article. I think that was about 600 to 800 words. One of my favourite uses, though, is to create the mails that we send out to the VIP subscribers of my list, and mails to those on the MacBites mailing list too. The entire process is done in Scrivener. Everything, from the initial writing right through to the export of the final thing. That's where the magic of compile comes in, the compile feature. That is a screenshot of the way that I used to do it. It has the contents that I want to include in a mail. They are highlighted on the left. If you've never seen the Scrivener interface, don't worry, we'll be actually seeing it shortly. But I select the chunks of information that I want included in a specific mail, and then I compile it to HTML. Now, if you're technically inclined and you're looking at that screen, you'll see that there is elements of writing content, and it's in a mixture of HTML and Markdown. So it's a bit like writing it in French and English. When it goes through the compile, it could turn that into German if you wanted. That's what compile does. It takes the input that you've written, but what pops out at the end, it can be one of many different formats, which again we'll see. When that mail comes out at the other end, and it is HTML, that's what it looks like. So it has the entire branding on it, it's got all of the styles on it, it's got the width on it, it's got the graphics in it. The whole thing is there. A little bit more advanced than that even is course creation. And this is because we're moving on to longer forms of content and the more complex content. There are so many elements to manage when you're creating a course, especially if you're creating it for somebody else. If it's for you, please yourself. But when you're creating it for somebody else, you don't have to just please yourself, you've got to please somebody else. So a few years ago, I created a series of courses about Pixelmator for Envato Tots Plus. And they had very specific requirements when it came to the documentation required to support the course. And at the beginning, I was reading the instructions thinking, oh my word, how am I going to manage this? And basically, instead of just creating the videos that they needed, they needed supporting materials in terms of links to the demo files, the length of each video, and all kinds of other elements. And I suddenly thought, Scrivener. Scrivener can handle all of that. So I managed the entire creation of those courses in Scrivener, and I do mean all of it. Course creation, content creation, data creation, recording the schedule, tracking progress. I embedded a numbers spreadsheet so I could do calculations for the length. I used Scrivener to track the duration of the videos, and then ultimately the cumulative duration of the course. The whole thing was in there. And it worked really well. It was amazing. The dual view meant that I could work with my course outline on the right, my main content in the editor on the left. I could navigate around the course using the binder on the left, and the whole thing was colour-coded as well. But by far the best bit was using the compile feature to create the very precise files I needed to send to Envato. Now, they were precise because they wanted to load them straight into their content management system to create the page. And it took me quite a while because really I felt I was trying to force compile to do something it was never really intended to. But compile is programmable, and compile is where the true power of Scrivener lies. And by taking that time, I would say, to learn how to do it. But, I knew how to do it in terms of compile, but in forms of standard compile. But this was challenging because what I wanted the output to be wasn't actually the content. Now, I don't think the designers of Scrivener had ever thought of that you might want to output just the metadata, because it's a very precise requirement. But I thought, you know what, it can probably do it. And it did take me a while, but I got there in the end. And the beauty of taking that time was I've never had to think about it again. So when I come on to show you compile, which I will do in an upcoming episode, I'll have to go back to the beginning and look at my compile settings, because once you've created them, you never have to think about them again, unless you need to change them. So having done all that work, I could create course after course after course and just use the same compile settings. And when I sent the files off, this is what we ended up with. So this is what the course actually looked like. There was no extra work at all. Everything you see came from Scrivener. I then took that a step further with iBooks Author Training. It's a premium training course with over 11 hours of training, and the whole lot was all prepared and organised in Scrivener. It was exactly the same principle, but just more of it. And there's no better feeling than when you're working through the course creation process. Watch that Scrivener interface turning green. I start off with things are red if I can't actually do anything about them. Other than that, they're either not started or they're at the yellow stage, moving through to amber, and when they're done, through to green. So literally you can glance at that and see your progress. You can also see in that screenshot a lot of the elements I talked about in relation to content. The content is the actual text within each of those items. But around that, we have colours, which are status. There's labels applied. You can see approved and awaiting approval, ready to record. All of that information is there for you at a glance. Now, that's course creation, but we also use it for MacBites. We finally got around to using Scrivener after trying virtually every system out there. We moved the entire production creation process into Scrivener, and we've never looked back. In fact, I say it's doing that and Notion, which is our other way of working with it. So we use both. It's not an either or, we use both. It's doing that that's enabled us to have the bandwidth available to do the after hours. And again, every element in there, Scrivener handles. It handles not only the recording notes, but it also the show notes when it's published. It's the same content, but again, it's the power of compile. I have the same content, but two very different compile settings, and everything that we needed is then exported. So the content itself is within each item, but within the document notes, it's got our recording notes. So our document notes contain the show notes, but the actual notes that we record with are within each item, and Scrivener handles both of them. As I say, it's the same content, but two very different compile settings. And I'll take you through that in a future show. When you press the button, that is what actually comes out. So if you were to look at it, we need it to be HTML to be put on the MacBites website. That's what comes out of Scrivener, all beautifully compiled. And that is what that content looks like straight out of Scrivener if you were to look at it in a browser. All we need to do is copy and paste that code into our WordPress site, and we're done. We're totally done with that. So before we actually have a look at it, where are we at platform-wise? Well, Scrivener started out and it was very much a Mac application. And the developer always said there would not be a Windows version. Please stop asking, there will never be a Windows version. But as you can see, he backed down. It took its time for a Windows version because he wasn't a Windows developer. In fact, before he wrote Scrivener, he wasn't a developer. He was a wannabe novel writer. That's how come Scrivener is so good. He wrote, the application he was looking for didn't exist, so he wrote Scrivener, and now it does. What he did with the Windows version was take on a Windows developer to create it alongside him while he worked on the Mac version. And that's why the Windows version is always a little bit behind the Mac version. As of today, the Mac version is at version 3. The Windows version is at 1.9. But the third version is, I think they're taking it up to version 3, is around the corner and has been promised to be around the corner for the last 2 years. The developer is renowned for getting it right, not rushing it. So when the Windows version comes out, I think they're hoping for almost 100% feature parity with the Mac version. There is also an iOS version. That's been out 3 years. So it was released in 2016, which meant, given that the iPad came out in 2010, it took 6 years to be developed. It is very good. Let's say that. It's very good. Now, if you want to work cross-platform, Mac, Windows, iOS, or any variation thereof, you're going to have that hanging together using Dropbox. It does not use iCloud. Now, when it first came out, the iOS version, and said you can use Dropbox to sync, people were screaming it didn't use iCloud, and I was not one of them. I thought, well, Dropbox, iCloud, whatever, as long as it works, does it matter? I have had problems with Dropbox. Mike hasn't had the problems I've had. The problems aren't that it won't sync. The problem for me was the time it was taking to sync. And when you see other applications like Ulysses, they're using iCloud, and it's seamless. You don't need to worry about it. You can edit it on one device and look at the next device and boom, it's there. Scrivener's not that, but I will take you through that with a dedicated session on how to make it work as best as you can mobile. But that's where we're at. So we have the 3 different platforms supported. To work seamlessly between them, your best bet is Dropbox or a pen drive. It's that bad, a Dropbox or a pen drive. But don't try using anything else, because the way that a Scrivener package is put together, you may suffer data loss if you try doing it any other way than with Dropbox. So you have been warned. Now let's actually go in and have a look at Scrivener. Now when you start Scrivener, I will start Scrivener on here. There we go. And what I would expect it to do, depending on how it's configured, is open up the file that I previously had open, which is a great time saver. But what I'm going to do there is close that down, and then I'll close Scrivener down. No, I don't need to. There we go. If you haven't had one open or you're using it for the first time, you will see the project templates. And this is where people tend to fall first, not at all sure what type of template to use and concerned they would not be able to change templates later. But let's have a look what you've actually got in this dialog box. The first thing that it shows you is the interactive tutorial. And the tutorial is, as it says, interactive. You open that and follow it through. Now, I know a lot of people reading a manual is bad enough without actually working through a tutorial. I would say it's worth it if you've never seen it before. It will help you. But be aware it talks in terms of novels, and if yours isn't particularly a novel, you may be like, I'm not interested in this bit or this bit or this bit, and then you've missed something that would be useful to you. Your other option is the Scrivener manual. Now, the Scrivener manual is absolutely huge, so I'm double-clicking on that, and it's going to open that in PDF Expert. And it's got 905 pages. I guarantee you, whatever it is you're looking for is in there. But good luck finding it, because it's not really the kind of book that you sit and read all the way through. Have I sat and read it all the way through? Yes, I have. But I still find myself referring to it. And I must admit, there were bits that I skipped that I considered to be a little bit, novelish. Not interested in that, too novelish. Now, as you're looking through this, it's beautiful, isn't it? It is a beautiful book. This was made in Scrivener. The whole thing was made in Scrivener. So it should give you confidence that whatever you want to put into Scrivener can come out looking absolutely beautiful. I will say they use latex on that, which is some interpretive language, to make beautiful, beautiful output, which your average person probably won't use. But if you need to look something up, do check the manual. If you are a visual learning person, there are video tutorials that you can find all over the net, to be honest, but also Scrivener's channel. Right, then you get into the actual templates. So the first option you've got is all of them, and it lists all the templates that are available in blank, fiction, non-fiction, script writing and miscellaneous. But I'll go through these individually. So a blank one is a blank one, as the name implies. You could create exactly the same content that you'll find in the fiction ones and the non-fiction and the script writing if you started with a blank one. But it doesn't give you any help along the way. It doesn't provide you anything extra other than the bare minimum. So if what you're writing is fiction-based, then there are templates to get you started. But what I would suggest you do with them is create, because what will happen is you will choose one of these, and then you will click the choose button at the bottom. And you must save the file before you start working on it. But what I would suggest is don't just sit here and randomly pick one thinking, well, it's a novel or it's a novel with parts, so I'll use that one. Go through each of these templates and make a file called the same name as the template, if you like, and put it in your documents folder. And then work through each one and see what it's got in terms of content and whether they've given you any templates, whether they've given you extra pages, what does each include, and does it suit the way you work? And it's the same with every other one in here. There are essays, there are general non-fiction, papers, all kinds of stuff. Script writing is a special area within Scrivener, and you can see each of these are very different to look at. You've got the BBC radio scene style, which has characters down the left-hand side by the look of it, dialogue on the right. But this one here for a documentary script is totally different. A screenplay is totally different to both of those. So these are fantastic starting points for you, as long as they are exactly what you're looking for. Miscellaneous section's interesting. It's got case studies in it, multi-blog templates, single blog templates, recipe collections, all kinds of stuff. Now, I think I started all of mine with a blank one and I built them up from there. But if you think about why I would do that, there's no point me starting with a comic script or a tape drama or a documentary script or an essay when my content's a podcast. So I started from scratch and I built up the elements that I needed to make that file logical and helpful to me in managing a podcast. I did exactly the same with my email one. But I thought we'd start with something normal. And what I've got, in fact, I'll show you how I made it. It was a fiction one. And I do believe I used the novel template. So I'm going to double click on there. And it's going to ask me to save it. So I'll put it in here. I won't call it untitled. That wouldn't be helpful, would it? I'll put novel demo. We know which one it is. So I'm creating a file at this point. Now, this has, let's take that full screen, lots of helpful information in it to help you format a novel quickly. To add all the information that you may have elsewhere and put that inside a single repository. So the only thing you would ever have to have open was Scrivener. So the first thing it does at the very top on the left-hand side. Now, if you've never seen Scrivener before, left-hand side, that's the binder. That is the navigation methodology that you have. You can jump about between your manuscript and its chapters and scenes within its chapters, characters, places, front matter, or notes you've created, or research. So it gives you a sample standard manuscript output. So that's the binder on the left-hand side. The middle bit is your editor. And the editor it shows you whatever the content from whatever you have selected on the left-hand side. So in that binder, as you select content, there's a cover and there's the dedication. It shows that in the middle, in the editor. Then you have the info panel over on the right, which can be toggled on and off. So if you need a little bit more space, you can toggle it on and off. But this is where you'll find a lot of that metadata that I talked about in the presentation part of this. You can have a synopsis. So if we had here a scene, we could put a synopsis in of that scene. So this would be the first scene in the novel. So sets the scene for the family drama. You may want to extend that a bit, introduces family characters, etc. So you could put that in. How would you use that? You could put that in at the beginning before you've written anything to remind yourself what's going in this scene. Now you might say to me, well, why don't you just put that in the scene? Thing is, with the synopsis, you can use it in multiple places. We're back to that compile magic again. I know Peter's getting very excited about the compile magic. But we've got to do all this first so you know where the magic's coming from. So I would put that in the synopsis because by default the synopsis doesn't get included in the compile if you don't want it to. Another thing you could do is put it in the notes. You have a notes area underneath. So you might say to me, well, why would I put that in there when I could put that in the notes? And you could. You could pop down there and put exactly the same thing in there. And if I put in the notes in capitals, no, not in the nights, in the notes. Let me show you where that pops up as we have a look round this. But we've also got other meta while we're in here. We have bookmarks, documents bookmarks. We can have project bookmarks. We can look at matching text. This is all metadata relating to the content of that scene. We've then got more general metadata, it says in here, custom metadata and keywords. So if we wanted to set up keywords, we could do that. Now you might say to me, what sort of keywords would make sense? Maybe characters, maybe point of view, anything else that makes sense to you. I mean, I put Syrian Lady Siri in. So that's your metadata. You've then got something called snapshots, which is your friend. Snapshots are used to create backups of the content, not of the entire file, just of this scene, just of the element that's in the editor. Now, the beauty of that is it means you've got very granular level rollback. So if you've got a subject matter expert creating content for you and they are saying this is revision 2, this is revision 3, oh, this is revision 4, hang on, revision 4 needs to be rolled back to revision 2, you'd be tearing your hair out. But Scrivener provides you tools for handling that. Let's say you've done revision 1. In fact, I can actually show you this. So there's revision 1. and I know I'm going to need to make some changes, I can opt to create a snapshot of that. That is the snapshot created. I give it a title and say that was revision 1. And then I just carry on working, revision 2, and put in there, added much more content. So that's revision 2. I create a snapshot of revision 2. And then, of course, guess what happens? Revision 3 comes in. That's revision 2. Added more content. So let's go to the top, change that to revision 3. Now, obviously, I'm making this simple by putting in that it's revision 3. But in your world, you don't want necessarily all the revision numbers in the actual content. So I'm just making it easier. So that was revision 3. Let's make a revision 3. And let's give that a name, Rev 3. Now, at this point, we go crazy. We've got lots and lots more content, and it becomes revision 4. So let's do revision 4 first, and then let's move down and get lots more content. Lots more content. Right, and that is revision 4. And that's the point. So that's your live one. It could have been much neater, couldn't it? But you get the idea. That's the one at the moment that's live. And then you get the dreaded call. We need to go back to revision 2. Now, don't trust them on this. They'll want revision 4 back tomorrow. So the first thing to do before you do anything is make a revision, a snapshot of what you've actually got now. That is revision 4. But look what we've got through here. These are your snapshots. And as I click them, underneath in the grey area, you actually get to see that content as it was at the point of revision 2, 1 and 3. So if we wanted to roll back to revision 2, all you need to do is highlight it and you have a roll back button and you roll the content back. It says, do you want to take a snapshot? Well, I've already done that, so I don't need to do it. But if you've forgotten, it will prompt you. So I'm not going to, and then I roll it back. And there it is. So I've lost all the content that was within revision 4. Doubtless revision 5 will be appearing from the subject matter expert tomorrow, but right now you've done exactly what they wanted, which is roll it back to revision 2. At which point, let's say revision 5 comes in. So you know we've not made any changes to revision 2, but this time we've got revision 5 and we've got in there lots of lovely new content. And that's great. At that point, they then decide they want to go back to revision 4. Now, let's see if we get prompted. So I'm going to go back to 4. I'll do a rollback, but it will say, do you want to take a snapshot? Oh, I've forgotten to do that. Yes, I do. Let's do revision 5, which is down there. So let's rev that, revision 5. But what we've got there is the contents of revision 4, and we can now quite happily just roll back between these things. Let's go back to 5. Let's even go back to 1 and roll it back. So that is one of the most useful features. As long as you remember to take your snapshots, then you can roll them back at any point. You can tidy up if you want and delete them, etc., but they take up such a tiny amount of space. And Scrivener is the one app that provides you with the mechanism to really use it and use it well. If you can imagine doing this in a Word document where you're trying to roll back 3 paragraphs, you'd have to have the content external to Word. And what would be most difficult is not writing the content, it'd be managing the content. Which revisions which, I've no idea. But all of that is handled in here because it has the time and date on the left-hand column, and on the right-hand column, any text that you choose to use as a title for that snapshot that you can then roll back. So that was just a little aside to show you just how powerful it is. You've then got your comments and your footnotes that you can actually put in there as well. Now, let's go back to our synopsis and our notes. I said, well, is it either or? Can you put them in one place or another place? Well, that's the interface that you've got by default. And a lot of people never seem to move out of there. But you have so much more that you can do with Scrivener by changing the view. So we have this view, which is the view we're using at the moment, which is the document view. But we also have the documents and subdocuments on a corkboard. Now you might look at that and think, that's not good, it doesn't show me anything. The corkboard view is intended to work a little bit higher up. So you can see the chapter, you can see within the chapter, you can see the scenes. Now for this to have any meaning, I'm going to dump this file. This file, if you remember, was created with the novel template. I'm going to dump it. I'm going to close this one, and I'm going to open one that was created in exactly the same way. So, A Christmas Carol. It was based on exactly the same template. The difference is it's got content, which means I can show you in a much better way. So we're looking at the novel format information that we've already seen. I folded everything up in the sidebar, in the binder. So I can unfold it to show you how it works. So now you've got an idea of what the interface does. Let's have a look at the interface, but through the eyes of this novel. Or if you prefer, this novel through the eyes of the interface. The actual novel itself is contained in manuscript. So manuscript is the sole folder that I would want compiled. So again, thinking forward to what you want out of this in the end, maybe an ebook or a PDF or a Word file. That's going to come from the manuscript. Everything else that you see in here, all of these things at the side, absolutely all of them, are metadata. This novel format at the top is all to do with the instructions for the template, explaining how that works and how to compile it. There are all those instructions there. The characters, well, these are actually the characters in the novel, and they're great to refer to, but you know what? You don't want them compiled. Unless you're doing a synopsis at the back of the book, you don't want them compiled. So all of those are extra. The locations are extra. Scrooge's office, Scrooge's house. And it allows you to clear your mind of, oh, what colour was the front door? You can always go back to this and you can check it out. Scrooge's house. It's where he first encounters Marley. It's Christmas. It's run down. He's miserly. You know, and the more information you put in here, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the notes, maybe we could put colour of the front door. The front door is black. The more information you put in, the better you will help your future self. Your future self will love you if you do that. So we've got characters, we've got places. We've got front matter. So we've got the manuscript format. We've got paperback format, all of these elements. We've got ebook, which has a cover in it, as we saw, and a dedication in it. So all I need to do is change that cover for a cover of A Christmas Carol, and I'm good to go. I do have an area for notes, but there's nothing in there. But in research there is. In research, don't know if you're aware, but Charles Dickens had an illustrator called Boz, and fantastic illustrations. There you go. Fantastic. And they appertain, so we've got info here. It's Mr. Fezziwig's Ball, and it's by John Leach, etc., etc. So we've got all the information in there. That is the paragraph near which that illustration needs to be. And then you've got references to it. So absolutely amazing stuff that you can do here. There we go. All the information. But again, you would want that information in your manuscript, but also available for you in the research section. And then there's templates. You can actually have templates. So we've got character sketches that are templates, and we've got settings that are templates. So that's where that is actually coming from when you make a new character or you make a new place. Now, let's close that down. So we've done the quick tour, the scenic tour. Let's concentrate on the manuscript now. The book itself has a preface. It then has the contents. He didn't use chapters, he used the word stave. So there are 5 staves in A Christmas Carol. And each one of those is in its own folder. But when I open up that, within there are separate scenes. So if you think of organising a novel and you decided that, you know, Scrooge's dinner should be before Marley's door knocker, you can move them around. If you want Marley at the beginning, you can move that around. And when you move one of these, so Marley's visit, move it to the top, not that that would make any sense, it actually changes location in the manuscript, and therefore, when you compile it, it changes its location in the compile. So for people like me, Mike's not like me, but for people like me who like to move things around to see where they work best, it makes it so much easier to do it. One of the problems we'd had long term with MacBites was we'd put the show together and then need to change the order of something. And we were working in a Google Doc at one point, and we had to literally copy it or cut it and paste it. And the number of times you lost a paragraph where it's like, where did that line go? In here, each of these elements in the binder on the left is completely separate from the rest. And if I move one, everything moves with it. So we have our opening here. Right, there's our opening. So the point of this was Marley was dead to begin with. There's no doubt about this. And the necessity to have that paragraph is, as he explains in the second paragraph, nothing good will come of this story unless you realise that Marley is dead. So, the opening scene. All right, the synopsis would be, Marley is dead. Nothing magical. Not magically, nothing magical. Without knowing and believing, Marley is dead. So that's the synopsis for this. Now, as I said, you could put some notes in here, but I'm going to put opening notes. So we've got different content. Now, why are we bothering? Well, let's go back up to Marley's Ghost, which is stave 1. We are in this view, which is the document view, if you remember. Now, it uses a different term at this point. It says view the group's subdocuments as scrivenings. So it's referring to each one of these documents, cards, elements. I call them scrivenings, and then I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the notes or the synopsis. It's a scrivening. And a scrivening is the most granular unit of content that has its own metadata. So when I drag and drop it and move it around, the metadata comes with it. That's critical when I go into a view like the card view, the corkboard view. If I have a synopsis, it's shown on the card. If I don't, it takes the first few words of my content. So if this one here, Fred's visit, I don't particularly want to see the whole thing. I just need to put in something like that describes it. So Scrooge's nephew, Fred visits. What you see on that card, the actual detail disappears and the synopsis appears. So when I said you could put it in the synopsis, you could put it in the notes, where you would put it depends on where and when you want to see it. Be aware that anything on the synopsis pops up on the card. That's the beauty of it. So we'll look at the MacBites file. The synopsis, you need to be very careful with the synopsis because it's going to appear on there. On MacBites, actually, we've got something wholly different going on, so it's worth seeing. Just for that, it's worth seeing. But that's where your metadata comes into it. Any notes, you need to decide what you're going to use each one of the elements of metadata for. What I did was, in the MacBites one, I might as well just show you the MacBites one, mightn't I? I put the show notes in there. So anything that appears on the website is in the notes. But as I say, that's very unusual for most people with their content. Their content is in these scrivenings, and it's the actual content that's in there that's going to be compiled. I'm just doing weird things with compile, but you'll thank me for that when we cover compile, because it'll be magic. It'll show you all kinds of things of which you have hitherto been unaware. I guarantee it. So that's what you've got in that view, which was the card view. So I'm on stave 1. I go to card view. I see all of the scenes, so I can choose to just work individually on a scene. Also, you have an outline view. Outline view, very important. I'm going to close down that meta and just show you this. This is all completely configurable. So label, it says no label. Status, first draft, revised draft. This is where adding the metadata allows you to go back and view it in a way that you could track your progress or anything like that. So let's say your target for the opening scene, you wanted to put in a number of words. This column would then show you the progress against your total. Now, I don't bother counting words. For most of my work, that's irrelevant, but if it's important to you, you can do that. Now, your labels and things, at the moment, they're just saying red, orange, yellow, not particularly helpful, but they are all editable. So if you wanted your labels to be more meaningful, you can not only add extra labels to it and rename the labels. So let's say I tend to have red, meaning hard hold. And that is, I cannot do anything about that until something else happens. And the classic example of that was, I was in the middle of a Pixelmator course and they were bringing out a new version of Pixelmator with a new feature that I had agreed to demonstrate. And I didn't at that stage have access to the beta, so that video was on a hard hold, as I begged Pixelmator to give me the beta, which they did, thankfully, at which point it came off hard hold and it went on to what would maybe be the next status for me, which would be, let's say, a blue one, which I'm going to drag up to the top and say, ready to prep. And you can make these labels anything you want and move them around, because I tend to have them as like traffic lights. So yellow could be ready to record. I'm not actually quite sure. Can't remember what I actually do call it, but let's say ready to record. None of this has any impact on your output at all. It's all for you to work with. But not only can you move these around and give them names of their own, you could actually change the interface of Scrivener by changing the word label. So at the moment, that's a label. But if you wanted that to be progress, maybe you just prefer the word to be progress. And you click OK. Now, instead of label, it says progress as the header. And this one in here, it's orange. Or these are written and finished. They're all green and finished. And you can then instantly see that. So its ability to help you during the writing phase is nothing short of amazing. All the things it can do. But don't get overwhelmed. Do not get overwhelmed and think, oh, how's that going to translate to what I do? What could I use that for? Just use what makes sense. Don't get overwhelmed with it. Grow with it, or let it grow with you. You literally here just add what makes sense. One of the things I stumbled with at the very beginning was keywords. I felt if I was going to use keywords, everything needed to have a keyword. There are very, very few files of mine that I have any keywords in now because I have no need for it. But if I suddenly did have a need to track something, then I maybe choose a keyword to do it. But don't feel obliged to use absolutely everything because you really don't need to. So that's what it looks like if you are writing a novel with it. After all, that is a novel, and that is what it looks like if you're writing a novel with it. You can, if you go up to the entire manuscript, view the entire manuscript and drill down through it in these views if you want. It just lets you work in any way that makes sense to you. And then the final stage, once you've signed everything else off, is to get the thing compiled, which is a whole show in its own right. But that's what a novel looks like. Let's have a look what my email generator looks like. It should have an email in for today, but the way things have been going. Right, what have we got in here? This is a little bit cramped because it's usually on an iMac. But what you can see in here is, have these all gone? They should all have gone. That one's gone. So I have a different status in there. I go down to my label and it says not started. Or it's a work in progress. Or it's ready to schedule. At the point it's ready to schedule, I'll have it as blue in here. But in order to schedule it, I would put it into Notion and then Mike would deal with it. So if I'm ready to send something, it's probably marked as in Notion. And then when I'm told it's gone, I would come back in here and change its label to sent. And that one's been sent. So we can see that if we go into the MacBites one. Let's do MacBites. Let's change that to an outline view so we can see it all. Oh, no, I don't put it in there. I'm lying. It's in there. There they are. There are all the mails that we've sent. So let me get that to a single view. And you can see the status on them all. Now, there are two things you can have. You can have labels and you can have status. Status of sent is important if you are in the corkboard view because the status is stamped right across it. I do have that down here. You can see them, but you'll also see I have graphics for some as well. You can have pictures. So you can do anything in here. Really, you can. The MacBites one is probably better to actually show you visually just what you can achieve. But it's a matter of making Scrivener your own. So before you even think about compile, think about how you want to work with it. What features has Scrivener got? And then look at those features in terms of what benefits they can provide you. So I've chosen to use the colours and have colours everywhere. I've got colours on the cards. I've got colours in the binder at the side that give me what I consider to be status, but they're actually labels. I have actually got, if I go into this outline view here, now they're all green, obviously, but if I go to this one, you can see I actually have in here the colours all the way across there. Now you'll notice in the other one, the other file, let's go and look at Christmas Carol, although I had some status in there, didn't I, in the first one, the cards aren't coloured. The cards have a little bit of colour at the side, rather than being coloured. There are no colours in the binder. All of that can be configured within the interface of Scrivener, which is something for another day. But just to show you, if you think, oh no, I can't be doing the colours, they're too garish, you can go for something far more subtle than I have done. But in MacBites, when I'm working with it, it's quick, quick, quick. I need to see straight off, quick glance, what's red, what's not red, and what can I make green. So this is a very different file. You'll notice if I show you that. It's a very different file. I have an inbox, I have admin. I then have the lists I've got. So I have MacBites, VIP, Slide IQ, iBooks Author, all kinds of stuff here. Let's get rid of that, that's trash. Research. You'll notice that there is a folder and it says draft. And next to it, it says NIU. There is a special folder in Scrivener, and if you've ever had any problems with compile, I'll bet you there's a very good chance that's why. That draft folder is a special folder. By default, that's what's included in the compile. Obviously, you're looking at this file, and that's not what I want in the compile. But instead of converting that draft folder into, say, MacBites, I took the decision that I needed to know which folder was the draft folder. You can't delete the draft folder. So it's a very special folder, and I needed to know it was there, but NIU means not in use. I'm not using it for anything. It's just sat there, and everything is happening outside the draft folder. I'll explain that more when we look at compile, but that's why I have that there. So this file is incredibly different from the novel file that we looked at, Scrivener file. Now I also have, if I go into Dropbox, I don't think I've even opened it on this machine for a long time, but in my, do they have it in apps? I do believe they do. And I have MacBites in here. It doesn't synchronise this one via Dropbox. I work on this locally. But this is the MacBites file, and it's huge. It has 12 years worth. It was our birthday on the 8th. It has 12 years worth of content in it. So let's have a look at that one. Right, this is 1, 2, 3 here, and I've got pre-records and I've got all kinds of other stuff. But I'm going to just show you this for now. Right, that's the folder. We've not got anything showing at the moment, so that's not very good, is it? But we will have. So if we look at the view and we load in the content, it will load in the content. But we actually want that one. We want that one. Now, those cards are far too big. Good grief. We want more than 2 across. Let's say we want 4 across. There we go. So that is what the MacBites file actually looks like. And it's got every MacBites in it going back to 2007 when we started. So I need to put in some graphics with these. I've only got the graphics in up to 117, but there is the MacBites folder. Oh, look at it, it's lovely. It goes all the way back with graphics. And if I show you that and we go to, which one did we do, Mike? Oh, wasn't that one? It was Road Warriors, I do believe, that one, which is the one that doesn't have the graphic. Brilliant. Right, that card is actually on the synopsis, and you can flick backwards and forwards between a synopsis and a graphic. So the synopsis doesn't have to be text, it could be just a graphic, whatever you wanted it to be. But if you look at the structure of this file, so let's make that a bit wider. There we go. Again, very, very, very different to a novel. Let me show you what we've got. Everybody's Scrivener file is going to look very different. I have an index, which is actually the index to each individual show. I can click on that and it will take me to a show. So if I wanted to see more about Top Gun meeting Dead-Eyed Dick, there we go. That was what was included in that show. So let's go back up. We've disappeared off the screen. It's got too big. Right, so that's my index. I then have an inbox. And then I've got a style guide that gives me all the text styles and section titles and show titles and show art. I have on diary events, so you'll see full year's worth and stuff that I know's coming up, like anniversaries of Kit and our birthday. I've got extras, which is anything else. I've even got front matter. Now you might be wondering, why on earth would I have front matter? But we do recording notes and we have a cover on them. So that's there. Hold me to this. I'll show you a compile where I show you how that works. But in terms of content, we then have MacBites, which has all of the shows in it. Goes back to 79. Oh, and a special for Jonathan's new car. But it goes back to episode 79. Prior to 79, we were doing it a different way. So I created an archive. And all of the ones before 79, going right back to episode 1, are in here for reference. So if it's like what show was called Flashing Info Panels, there's the Flashing Info Panels show. So this is, as far as we're concerned, the ultimate source of truth for MacBites. And it is just a standard Scrivener file, and it started life as a standard Scrivener file, and it got developed to do what we needed it to do. So as I say, I know everybody's giddy about compile, but before you even contemplate compile, you've got to think about creating the content in Scrivener and using the features of Scrivener in the best way possible for you. By all means, read what other people do with it, but do not, on pain of death, just adopt their working practices unless they happen to be a carbon clone of you. Because while you'll get some great ideas, there'll also be you trying to fit your workflow to their mindset, where really you need to create a workflow in Scrivener that matches your mindset. That's what you need to do. So that is our intro to Scrivener, our intro to creating content in Scrivener. Basically, set up your file. In fact, do this week. Set up your file, and we will get ready to actually create more content and show you how everything works in a future show. Now, we should at this point be doing an unboxing, shouldn't we, Mike? And we can do an unboxing. We're in the hotel, but the table's full of boxes that I brought with me to unbox. We have had the mother and father of all nightmares with technology. Words can't begin to express my exasperation.
Blue words can.
Blue words can, maybe. Maybe blue words can, but that's not the point. So, I doubt there's going to be an unboxing. I think I'm just going to swiftly move along and talk about everything else. But in the meanwhile, if you've enjoyed this show, we love you. Could you love us? We'd love it if you could do that. And we will be back live next week, when thankfully I shall be safe and warm in the warm cocoon that is MacBites headquarters. I'm just going to have to stop for a minute, aren't I, Mike? Because I just can't let that moment go. I'm going to put this photo up in 45. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite so cute as that. I might be able to get that picture in the show. If I can, I will. Our beautiful, beautiful daughter Lola is asleep. Oh, I need to express at this point, she is a dog. On her back, legs akimbo, and her front paws wafting gently in the air. It's the sweetest thing. Oh, well, actually, the holiday's been great, hasn't it, Mike? Apart from the internet, of which there hasn't been any. So next week we're back and we'll have internet and everything. You know, sound, vision, pictures. It'll be wonderful. It'll be wonderful. And we'll have more Scrivener. We'll have more all sorts. But I'm not going to make any rash promises because I did that last week and then the internet let me down this week. But there you go. We will be back next week. Now, in the meanwhile, you can keep up with all that we're doing. Oh, look, a QR code. It's got to be done, hasn't it? If you would like to sign up and to know what is happening, and as soon as it's happening, there is my VIP list. And you can just point your iPhone at that and it should automatically take you to the right page to sign up. Now, what goes on there is all our techie and training stuff. But if you want the fun stuff as well, if you want the actual fun we have on a normal MacBites show, there is the MacBites mail, and there's a QR code for that as well. Hopefully that will work. So have a look at those. Keep you entertained in our absence. We're also keep your ear out on MacBites FM. Because we're doing something called the Dirty Dozen to coincide with our 12th birthday. And they're going out exclusively on MacBites FM next week. So enjoy that. But we are going to head on. We're not even heading off for something to eat, are we? Because it's an alarming time and I've just stuffed myself with breakfast, which was gorgeous. And on top of the meal we had last night, which words could not possibly describe, there was the full 3-course meal, wasn't it? I didn't take pictures. I should have taken pictures. I had the lamb and it was fabulous.
I had fish and chips.
Which was
fabulous.
Which was also fabulous. Yeah, but he topped it off with a rocky road that I did get a picture of.
Lola had dog food.
Lola enjoyed herself, never mind. So we're going to... Now, actually, I can tell you exactly what I'm going to do. It is currently 22 minutes past 1 on Friday afternoon, and I've got to turn this Sal's ear into a silk purse of a show and get it to you on an internet connection 550 times slower than I'm used to by 9 o'clock tonight. If I succeed, you'll have just watched it. If not, it's probably early next week and you're wondering what happened to Friday. But never mind, as I say, we'll be back live next week. So for now, it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me.
And we'll both
see
you next time. Bye.